start again. It's a rich thing.
What's going on, everybody? It's the Bulls Show, aka Aidan, and welcome back to another video. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got an episode of Chicago Bulls Weekly to bring to you guys as we look at the previous week for the Chicago Bulls, as well as discuss the upcoming week that we have to look forward to as the Bulls go out west. We will also be giving awards to some of these players for their performances this week, so we've got a lot to get through, ladies and gentlemen. But before we get started, please like and subscribe to the Bulls Show, turn notifications on, and let me know in the comments below your thoughts about the Chicago Bulls previous week and how many wins do you expect us to get next week. It's one of those things where I feel like it's a very fun time to try and predict how many wins the Chicago Bulls can get from certain weeks on end. And I feel like this is going to be a very intriguing one because we do have 3 away games to look forward to. They're all out west and none of them are going to be easy. So we've got a lot to look forward to if you're a Bulls fan during this upcoming stretch of games. But to look at the previous week for the Chicago Bulls, we had 3 games to look forward to that week. We ended up going a positive record of 2-1. And 2 of those games are games where I feel like the Chicago Bulls had to deliver on the court against a team that's relatively unhealthy in Cleveland, and a must-win game against the Detroit Pistons, and the Bulls delivered on what they were supposed to do. But obviously, in saying that, we also had one of those games against a tough competitive opponent where the Bulls did not deliver on the night. So looking at the scores for this game, the first game was against the Philadelphia 76ers, where we lost this game 121-106. The dynamic duo of James Harden and Joel Embiid was simply unstoppable, and we could not really get a sniff in this game. And at the end of the day, it's one of those types of situations where Philly have a very strong team. They've been together not too long now, but still they have that competitive edge over the Chicago Bulls, already beating us 3 times this season, and they extended that to 4 in this game, and it was a very lackluster game if you're a Bulls fan. It's one of those games that was very frustrating. It also was a game where we constantly sent the Philadelphia 76ers to the foul line. One of the biggest topics of discussion during that period was how many times the Bulls kept on sending guys to the foul line compared to how little we got to the foul line as well. I guess you could put that on the referees, but you could also put that on the Bulls players not willing to put in the extra mile on defense and just resort to reaching in. So really, really bad time against Philadelphia. But again, against the Detroit Pistons, a game where Detroit were coming into this game relatively hot, winning 6 out of their last 9 games. And it was a very tough game against Detroit as well. But we did what we were supposed to do, and we won this game 114-108 with a very strong fourth quarter performance from DeMar DeRozan and the Chicago Bulls, as we picked up a very important victory, knowing that our losing streak could potentially end against the Pistons, and thankfully it has. And it was just a win that made us feel what it's like to win games again. It was over a week and a half of basketball where the Chicago Bulls didn't win a game. Yes, Detroit came into this very hot. Yes, if they did win this game, I think it would have been a game where not many people would be too surprised, considering the opposition that they've beaten, as well as just how hungry they've come out to play games recently. They didn't have their starting center as well, so that kind of helped the Chicago Bulls also. But simply, we were the better team. We were the better team 4 times against the Detroit Pistons, and we walked away with that must-win victory. And obviously, the last game against the Cleveland Cavaliers, which happened just recently, with the return of Alex Caruso, and we ended up having one of the best defensive performances we've had all season, beating the Cleveland Cavaliers 101-91. One of the games where offensively you're not performing well, efficiency outside of maybe 3 guys, everybody else was really poor on the efficiency side of things when it comes to shooting the basketball. So you had to rely on other ways to win this game, and that is very important towards the future of the Chicago Bulls, because we need to know when there are certain games where we're not scoring the ball well, we can rely on our defense and them struggling as well for us to win games like this. And I felt like it was a very important victory for the Chicago Bulls, and it's only fitting that Alex Caruso returns and we hold the team to under 100 and a little bit over 90. It's a great result for the Chicago Bulls against a relatively unhealthy Cleveland side. Both teams relatively unhealthy in this game. We didn't have Zach LaVine. We're obviously missing Patrick Williams, Alonzo Ball as well. They're missing a whole bunch of guys. I've already mentioned all the guys that they were missing in the last video. But yes, that is a hindrance towards Cleveland as well. They've been struggling for quite some time now because of the guys that they've had out. But also in saying that, they're a very tough team, and they proved it in this game again with the Chicago Bulls. But with that 2-3, with that 2-1 record in 3 games for the Chicago Bulls, there's obviously some awards that we have to give out for these players. So we're going to start off with obviously the must improve, which is the most disappointing player of the week, the sixth man of the week, the best sixth man out of the entire week for the Chicago Bulls, and the player of the week, which obviously means the best player in total for the Chicago Bulls. So starting off with the must improve, I have one that I feel like many people could see as a bit of a questionable one. Also, it could be seen as very logical depending on who you are and I guess how you see the game of basketball. But for me, I'm going for someone that didn't really have much of an impact in these games, but there's a reason for that in my opinion, and it's going to be Troy Brown Jr. I feel like the minutes that he plays is very valuable towards the Chicago Bulls in terms of he gets a lot of minutes and he can work very hard on the court for you, but he doesn't find a way to put himself in situations where he is making an impact, at least a noticeable impact on the court. There are some times where he gets a little bit of hustle plays, some of the stuff you don't see on the stat sheet, which was very helpful if you're a guy like Troy Brown Jr. But in terms of this week specifically, I don't recall much of what I saw from Troy Brown Jr. despite him getting a lot of minutes on the court. And that's something that definitely needs to be improved upon. Again, you're one of those guys that potentially in a playoff series, we have to rely on making shots if he gets minutes. He has to hit the corner threes. He has to drive to the basket. He has to make smart IQ, high IQ plays. And this week specifically, we've seen what happens with Troy Brown Jr. when he's not necessarily involved in games. It almost like he feels like a passenger in games. And I think I've said that numerous times with Troy Brown Jr. this week. So a bit of an unfortunate one here for him because I do believe he's had a really strong week prior to this one. He had a great period where he was making a lot of threes. He made more threes than I could remember him making in quite some time the whole season for the Chicago Bulls during that stretch. But obviously, I guess all good things come to an end, and that run came to an end with Troy Brown Jr. Now, the most important thing for him now is to pick it up in the next game against Sacramento, then hopefully against Utah and Phoenix, because these are very tough games, and for order us to win these games, we need everybody to contribute in one way or another. I don't really think we need a passenger to come into this team and kind of not do much on the floor. No disrespect to Troy Brown Jr., I just personally feel like that's how it kind of went for him this week, and hopefully things will change in the next week, and I do have faith he can turn things around, especially if the Bulls try to find him for some open threes. I think he could definitely knock them down, especially with this recent stretch. The sixth man of the week for me is a very difficult one to decipher because if you're thinking about giving it to Kobe White, he had a 19-point performance, I believe, this week. And he also had a very good performance against Cleveland. But in that Cleveland game, he actually started for the Chicago Bulls. And against the Detroit Pistons, he was my must improve. So I can't really say he had a strong performance against Detroit either. Then you look at Tristan Thompson. He actually started one of the games as well against the Philadelphia 76ers. And I thought he had a good week this week, to be honest, with Tristan Thompson. But in saying that, it's a bit disappointing. I can't really give that to him either. So if you're looking at other players to give it to, Alex Caruso played one game this week. I don't feel that's fair to give it to him based off of one game. So I'm going to give it to Derrick Jones Jr. I think it's a very fine line between the must improve and the sixth man of the week this week, unfortunately. But at the end of the day, he did deliver on some good performances this week. 2 out of the 3 games, I thought he was very strong. And against Cleveland, he was my must improve, so he didn't have a great game there. But he did play limited minutes in that game. All things considered, I think Derrick Jones Jr. has had a good stretch of things recently. He had a good week last week, in my opinion. And I think he picked it up in this week as well. And hopefully he can have a better week next week because, again, we don't need passengers on this team. The better we see Derrick Jones Jr. play, it's very important that we see him play to that level. Then obviously the better the Chicago Bulls will play, hopefully if everybody else can end up playing well as well. And then the player of the week for me is DeMar DeRozan. Again, a really strong performance from Io against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Detroit, he actually did very well on Cade Cunningham as well. So he's definitely in contention for this as well. But DeMar DeRozan, with the statistics that he throws up there, ladies and gentlemen, and just being able to impact the game in so many other ways outside of scoring, for me, I think it's a very clear and obvious choice that he is my player of the week. So congratulations to DeMar DeRozan, and hopefully, again, he can have a much better week going forward in terms of efficiency, because that's probably where his weakness was this week. But all in all, it's a DeMar DeRozan week as per usual. There's not too many people that will get this award over DeMar DeRozan this week included. looking at the 3 games that we have ahead, ladies and gentlemen, I've mentioned them already, but the first one is going to be against the Sacramento Kings away from home. This is the game where I look at and I think must-win game for the Chicago Bulls. Again, you can't really predict how you're going to play against a team like Utah that does have a lot of pick and rolls. You can't really predict how you're going to play against the Phoenix Suns, who beat us at home, and it was a very embarrassing loss despite us losing by 3 points. We were down by 20 for the majority of that game, so that's a really hard game to predict the Bulls going out and finding a way to win. Borderline impossible at times if you consider the way Phoenix have been playing recently, but always there's an opportunity for us to win all of these games realistically. But in saying that, Sacramento is the one where you look at and you think the Chicago Bulls, if they're going to walk away from this negatively, this is the game they at least need to walk away with the win from. They have a negative record. The Chicago Bulls are the superior team at this point in time. Sacramento are not terrific from the 3-point line. All of this suits our favor. And with more players coming back, potentially healthy and ready to go against the Sacramento Kings, the Bulls have to get that motivation, get that extra lift and foot in their step to just get a little bit more to win this game against the Utah Jazz. Because the next game against the Sacramento Kings, because the next game is against the Utah Jazz. Utah is one of those teams where we did beat them first time around. I think they had a couple of injuries. I don't really remember how that game went, but a lot of people do remember that game fondly and saying that it was one of the better Chicago Bulls performances we've seen. That's obviously a great sign. What I know from Utah is that, again, they do rely a lot on team play, and they will have players beat you that you don't expect, but also they're a very dominant pick and roll team, and that's something that we end up not having a great pick and roll defense. So if we could find a way to resolve those issues, I think we have a good chance to beat Utah. And all in all, I do think we have a good enough team to compete at least with Utah and make this a very close game against them. We'll have to wait and see how that one goes, but hoping the Bulls can find a way to win this one. And then obviously the last game is going to be against the Phoenix Suns. I'm not sure which Phoenix Suns team is going to show up. Apparently Devin Booker returned recently, so that's obviously going to be a big blow for the Bulls, but I don't think Chris Paul is going to be playing in this game. At least I'm not entirely sure at the moment. Feel free to let me know the injury list for the Phoenix Suns, but at the end of the day, they are still one of the best teams in the NBA, and arguably with their record, they are the best team in the NBA at the moment, and they're probably the favorites, one of the favorites to compete for a championship this season. So it's definitely not an easy ride against the Phoenix Suns, but just imagine what a win against Phoenix will do for our confidence. All this conversations about not being able to beat the elite teams, losing to Philly previous week is very, very, very poor, but it still brings that conversation that we can't beat the elite teams. Imagine what will happen if we end up beating a Utah Jazz and a Phoenix Suns. If we beat both of them or if we beat one of them, those conversations slowly begin to die out because we're beginning to prove to the league that we can still beat these teams, and most importantly, we're competitors with these teams. We're in conversation as one of the best teams in the NBA alongside of these teams. So I'm really looking forward to this West Coast trip. I don't expect a massive performance from all 3 of these games. I do expect the Chicago Bulls to potentially lose some of these games. If you're asking me what I think we're going to do, I'm going to be an optimist this week. Players returning, confidence, positive vibes. I'm going for 2 out of 3 wins this week. That's my prediction, and hopefully they could deliver on the court and prove me right. Maybe 3 out of 3 is definitely not out of the question, but again, very easier said than done. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you're new. If you watch every week, ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you next week. But if you watch more than that, I'll see you in the next Chicago Bulls video. Have a wonderful and safe day. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay tuned for more. Take care.